of society by facilitating his or her reintegration as a law-abiding citizen. Those are the two criteria that the board is most interested in and by law must consider before making a decision.
Ms. Odes, we're moving on to Mr. Couric, please, for 5 minutes.
Thanks very much, and thanks to our witnesses for being here, and specifically a big thanks to all of those who serve under you and your organizations for the hard work that they do to keep Canadians safe. Commissioner Duhamel, I'm just wondering if you could commit to table the number of cases that might be affected by the Bykovitz decision. Is that something you'd be able to take back and table to this committee?
Mr. President, I can commit we'll look into it, but I'm just not quite sure if we have it. So
no, I appreciate that. Thank you very much. Commissioner Kelly, are narcotics and hard drugs allowed in Canadian prisons?
No, they are not.
So then why, and do you not think it's a little bit disingenuous that that there are prison needle exchanges and safe injection sites that allow for the legal consumption of narcotics in Canadian prisons?
So these are harm reduction programs that have been implemented. In terms of the prison needle exchange program,
So Commissioner Kelly, you stated that narcotics are not allowed in our prisons. Yet there is programs that facilitate their legal use in our prisons. I think Canadians are rightfully disappointed, and quite frankly, I hear from many that are disgusted that that would be something and the official policy of the Correctional Service of Canada. But I think further to that, Commissioner, do the guards that are responsible for ensuring that inmates are safe and ensuring that the Canadian public are safe, do guards, the correctional service officers of this country, support those programs and their use in our prisons?
So in terms of the prison needle...
So do guards, do officers support these programs? And they're the ones that are on the front lines of facing the consequences of these programs. Do they support those programs in our prisons?
I would say that some, yes, do support it. I would say that the prison needle exchange program is more challenging, and there's more support for the overdose prevention service.
So it's interesting because when it comes to, and I've tabled a petition in the House of Commons from correctional officers, and I've spoken to many correctional officers, and I'm proud to represent Battle River Crowfoot, of which is home to a federal institution, and many of my constituents are in fact correctional officers. And so far, I have yet to find an officer that supports the administration and allowance of illegal narcotics in Canadian prisons. Madam Commissioner, when it comes to stopping the flow of narcotics, do you think an environmental assessment of netting over a prison or some of the other tools that could actually deal with things like drones but getting held up in the bureaucracy, do you think that's an acceptable excuse to slow down the approval of things that would actually stop the flow of illegal drugs into our prisons?
Actually, we've done an awful lot. Drones are definitely an issue.
A huge issue, yes.
Yes, and there's been an increase in the last year of 37%. Since 2020, it's been an increase of 104%. Yeah. And we have different measures that we use, intelligence, searches, but also we have drone detection systems.
But I do hear again from...
Chair. I understand Mr. Kirk loves the sound of his own voice, but I would actually love to hear the answer from Commissioner Kelly on any of his questions.
Okay. Let's continue, Mr. Couric, please.
Thank you, and I'm sorry that Ms. O'Connell is so offended by some of the questions that I'm asking on behalf of prison guards in our country. So Commissioner Kelly, the challenge associated with some of these things is that there is there's been a staggering decline in morale within the correctional service. There has been a host of concerns. There's not trust within the Ombudsman's office. So my question is simple, and I hope to get a quick one to the parole board here as well. But will you commit to speaking with your officers on the ground to actually hear the concerns that they have within the service?
What I can say is in the last few days, I've visited 3 institutions, and every time I visit an institution, I speak to the union's representatives and I gather their comments.
So some unsolicited advice is speak to some of the guards on the ground, Commissioner Kelly, because I can tell you the conversations that I have, there is a troubling lack of confidence and a growing decline in morale within your service that is ultimately impacting the public safety of not only those officers, but also the trust that Canadians need to have in their institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carrick. We're moving on now to Mr. Gahir online, please.
Thank you, Chair. So my questions are largely for the RCMP, but others should feel free to chime in as well. Commissioner, we've seen a rise in extortion attempts that have been targeting the South Asian community across Canada. But there's been obviously a large focus of that in BC and in Ontario. It always follows a very similar pattern where business owners are reached out to, perhaps a phone call is made on WhatsApp, a certain amount is demanded. If the demand is not met, then their businesses or their homes are targeted, and oftentimes with gunfire. And I've received videos from constituents of their homes actually being targeted by gunfire. Do you want to comment on what perhaps the RCMP is doing to help this problem?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, for the question. First off, I feel sorry for the people who have to go through this type of extortion. It's unacceptable in Canada. You will note that Peel had started a extortion crime task force, as well as one in Edmonton and there's one in British Columbia. And what the RCMP is doing is the overarching role of connecting all three organizations to make sure that we have the right picture. There's some good intelligence being drawn from working together, and if we come across enough information where we have the appropriate information or evidence to lay charges, we will lay charges.
So the RCMP has gone on record to state that organized crime is obviously linked to this as well. But what I want to ask is, this was not happening prior to fall of last year. So was there, very frankly, is there an international component to this that was triggered by something that perhaps happened in the fall?
Well, I'm not quite sure if the numbers were the same, and apologize if I don't have the statistics, but I'm not quite sure if it's been influenced from a certain event, or you still had extortion, but maybe not at the level that you're seeing today with the violence that you're seeing today. So.
Yep. Look, I think certain members of the community are leveling allegations, saying that when the Prime Minister came out and spoke on the murder of Hardeep Singh Nijjar out in BC, perhaps that was a precipitating event. After that is when we saw a real spike in some of these extortion attempts, especially targeting the Punjabi Sikh community in Ontario, in BC, in Alberta, and elsewhere. We've also heard from Peel Police that perhaps this is inspiring copycats as well. That individuals have sort of, found this scheme in which they can make money, and they're not perhaps being caught by local law enforcement. Do you want to comment on that?
Well, I would first say that as to Peel's comments, I can't really comment on it. It's the first time I hear about copycats, but the RCMP takes the question of extortion very seriously, and that's why we put a national project team together to make sure that we can connect the dots and demonstrate that they're possibly related from what we're seeing in Ontario and Alberta and British Columbia. And I just want to share that the RCMP works really closely with the service to address any threats that come in and work with local police jurisdiction to make sure that we can keep the community safe.
Yeah. Does the CBSA want to comment on members of the community saying that this is linked to the comments that Prime Minister Trudeau made on Hardeep Singh Nijjar?
I think this CBSA, in fact, we've had one employee kind of targeted by social media campaigns and that kind of information. And, I think we've worked very hard to make sure that people can trust the integrity of the CBSA officers and the people that are serving Canadians. So I think we have noticed some threats and comments directed towards one member of our team. And I think we've taken all appropriate action to make sure that the travelers are safe and that employee is safe.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Mr. Gahir, thank you. Mr. Motz, please, for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Chair. My questions today are going to be focused more to Ms. Geddes, specific to firearms. Now, I know that back in 2019, the minister of the day and internal documents have shown that the government has estimated the confiscation of the firearms will be 400 to 600 million. We know that that is probably 3 times less than what it actually will be. Conservative estimates, small c conservative estimates from across the industry put it at over $2 billion. So a couple questions around the confiscation. Government calls it buyback. You can't buy something back you never owned in the first place. But in any event, the confiscation of firearms, what is the department's plan to make that happen? First question. And how do you propose it to be rolled out? Who's going to be doing it? There's a lot of ambiguity in the industry and with firearm owners, and I think with public safety, because we're not sure exactly what's happening on that front. Could you just kind of give us an update on that, if you'd be so kind, please?
Thank you very much for the question. First of all, at Public Safety, we certainly are framing it as a firearm compensation program. As you pointed out, an extremely complex program to be able to deliver. Some of the data has indeed been difficult to obtain. We're working as closely as we can with business and industry who have access to the best possible data. We're working with chief firearms officers across the country as well to try to do our best to be able to get a good estimate of the number of firearms that we will be looking at compensation. In terms of the program development itself, as the minister spoke to, we're looking at doing this in 2 phases. So first, to be able to look at how we collect from business and industry, and in the process of doing so, to be able to learn from that about the most cost-effective, the most efficient, and the way in which to ensure the safety of Canadians in the way in which we deliver on this program. So first phase being business and industry, and the second phase being to reach out to individuals who are currently protected under the amnesty order. So we're doing it in a very careful, conscientious way. As I said, kind of got it by those 3 principles about efficiency for dollars for Canadians, doing this in a very cost-effective way, but also, as I said, making sure that we are prioritizing public safety throughout the execution of the program.
Okay, I'm going to get to the amnesty issue in a minute. You know, what I find troubling is that the evidence that law enforcement has shown across the country is that this, you know, you're the wrong person to ask, but I'm going to make the statement anyway, Ms. Geddes, that the confiscation of these firearms will do nothing to improve public safety in this country. Absolutely nothing. In fact, gun crimes continue to go up even during this amnesty program, and not by firearms owners. So I guess what I'm concerned about is the law enforcement community has pushed back on government and has voiced their concern and their opposition to being the ones responsible to confiscate these firearms, including the RCMP. I'm just wondering, you know, you can go to industry and ask them to voluntarily surrender the firearms that fall under this prohibition, you know, voluntarily with compensation, which I hope will be appropriate, except the taxpayers are going to be on the hook for it. But how are you going to deal with individuals? Who's going to collect the firearms from individuals who resist this policy, not because they are criminals, but we've made administrative criminals out of people without committing a criminal act. And I'm just kind of concerned about that. And I want to get to another question that it's in line with it, so together. So the government has introduced legislation to, you know, some proposed legislation and changes to the Elections Act. One of them being the election might take place later in October, like October the 27th of 2025. So has there been any thought to the impact changes to the Elections Act will have on the amnesty period, which goes till October 25 of